This case isn't closed. They said
No, it's this one. Pretty much there.
look what it says. Energy is not your property tax.
Yes.
Commissioner Kasher? Here. Commissioner Eskovitz? Commissioner Wasserman?
Present.
Commissioner Nguyen?
Here.
Chair Rumkey?
Here. Good morning. Unfortunately, Commissioner Eskovitz cannot join us today. Before we get started, I just want to make a brief comment thanking all of the staff here at the FPPC. As you can tell from this agenda, everybody in every division has been working incredibly hard lately. And beyond the day-to-day requirements of their job, we also have a lot of special projects going on, and we're going to talk about some of those later during the staff reports. But everyone's stepped up and taken on extra responsibilities, for example, with our website, which is being premiere viewing later today if you have time to stay by at 4. And the content authors on that and the editors from every division, especially technical assistance division, had a lot of extra work on that project. And I just want to thank all of you for really putting in the extra time and effort. And I think we're going to continue to see the success of that work. So thank you. Okay, is there any public comment on any item not on the agenda before we get started? Sir?
Thank you, Chairwoman. Good morning, Commissioners. My name is George Barrage. I'm a former city councilman in the city of Cotati. And you might remember I was before you in February of this year. A little background, I've been actively involved in my community, attending almost every planning commission meeting and city council meeting for almost 20 years. I've run for public office, I've been elected to public office, and I've been booted off public office for doing my job and being the minority voice in my town. The fact is, I'm loved in my community, and I'm also despised, which is the nature of politics, which brings me to what I'm going to say to you right now. I came before you in February asking that I file a complaint against the city council and city staff back in October of 2014. And with that complaint, I alleged that the city used public funds to wage a political campaign to support a sales tax measure on the ballot. I walked in opposition to that tax measure by myself, ran a shoestring campaign of under $600 or $700, and I lost that campaign 52% to 48%. It was that close. But I submitted to the commission the mailings, the bulk mailings that the city provided every resident in town, which myself and many of my fellow citizens in town feel is clearly political advocacy. And I think you and your investigative staff will see that as well. And it's 10 months since I filed this. And routinely, the commission provides a letter to the complainants that an investigation is underway. The body will not make any decision until it's time to do so. But I've gone to the local press about this matter, and they say, hey, we've checked with the FPPC. There's no complaint against the city of Cotati pending. And I'm saying it's long overdue.
Just so I'm clear, you submitted a sworn complaint?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and I have all the information here, and I'm not accusing your investigative staff of dragging their feet. Many of us are overworked and so forth, but I think this is an important matter. I'm worried that the city council are going to be off the city council or retired by the time this case comes around, or they're going to win their reelection this next year. And this is a serious matter. And I'm under obligation for my community to come up here today because a lot of citizens have asked. We received all these things in the mail from the city.
Right.
which clearly crossed the line. It went over the top of public information to vote and so forth. So I'm just asking you, I'm going to leave my business card. If any of you folks want to contact me, I'd be happy to meet with you.
Well, can you leave your business card?
Sure,
with,
sure.
Hyla, our general counsel here, and I'll have her look into it. Obviously, as the commissioners, and if this is an investigation, we can't get involved in any of the information at this point, but I'll have her look into your complaint and someone will get back to you.
Okay, thank you. And I come up here today, take a day off of work because it is serious. And, you know, we're looking farther into the city council on their 700 forms. These are people who haven't even declared that they even own property in town, and they all own their own homes. So we're going to be filing other complaints as well, but we want to take this in some kind of logical order and like to get this complaint up and running first. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Okay, any other public comment? Sir?
Hello, my name is Michael Charamello. I'm a civic activist, investigative journalist. I've filed some complaints with the FPPC before. I'm also a friend of Mr. Barrage's. I live in Dixon. He lives in Katati. This is very unusual that you would have a case that started in October and received nothing but lip service. There was a letter sent out in March after Mr. Barrage came up in February. And they said the investigation was ongoing or was starting, and nothing has occurred. Now, Mr. Barrage, when he was in office, his own people filed a complaint against him for campaign irregularities. He was fined $9,000. The people that actually were guilty were charged with $15,000 fines, but they were indigent. I'm currently asking your staff to look into what happened to that fine. So Mr. Barrage has a personal thing going on here that he was actually under investigation by the FPPC, and he simply wants a matter of fairness here of both sides being looked at. City governments have a tendency to twist the law to do what they need to do to get the funding that they supposedly need. The law says you cannot advocate with taxpayer funds. That's what they've done. And they will say that they didn't, but right on one of the brochures, it says vote. And it says what the measure is. If you say vote, and you only have one side of the educational process going on, not oppositional views, that's advocating a vote. I think that this needs to be investigated and needs to be investigated fully. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Is there any other public comment? Okay, seeing none, we're going to go ahead and move to item 2, which is approval of the June 2015 committee meeting minutes. Are there any comments or corrections on the minutes before we take a vote? Is there a motion?
I move approval of the minutes.
Second. Commissioner Kasher? Yes. Commissioner Wasserman?
Yes.
Commissioner Nguyen?
Yes.
Chair Emke?
Yes.
This motion passes.
Thanks. Okay, next, items 3 through 53, the proposed consent calendar. I've been asked to remove items 9, 11, and 37 by the commissioners. Are there any other items that should be removed?
Yes, Madam Chair. 3 and 7, please. And also, if we proceed thereafter to the remaining consent calendar, when we approach the ones that have been taken out of order, may we do 11 first, because I intend to recuse myself so I can leave and come back.
Or do you want to do it last? Okay, we will.
Well, either way,
All right, 11.
somewhere
Yes.
that makes sense.
Got it. Thank you. Okay, so 3, 7, 11, 9, 37. The remaining items on consent, do the commissioners have any comments or questions? Let's see what we've got here. So 3's off.
Hi, I have a question regarding item number 4. In particular, I was just curious. It looks like the proposed penalty is about half of what the maximum penalty amount is. And then looking at the facts of the particular matter, seems like the there was a kind of a, you know, they didn't want to participate or cooperate, and I'm wondering why it's only half of the maximum penalty, and what were some of the factors that we considered for that?
Sure. Galena West, Chief of the Enforcement Division.
We were talking about number 4.
Muhambe.
Oh, because I thought it was the maximum. So go ahead.
It actually is the maximum, but
Okay.
it reads differently. What happened was, in coordination with LA, we prosecuted this case. And so the maximum fine was just split between the two jurisdictions. So
Okay.
they did get fined the maximum amount,
Okay.
but then it was split between the two jurisdictions as a joint investigation.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
And LA is also seeking an additional 54,000.
Yes, they will hear their part of the agreement on the 26th.
Okay.
Okay, any other questions or comments regarding the remaining items on the consent calendar? Do I have a motion?
So I move approval of the consent calendars with the exception of 3, 7, 9, 11, and 37.
A second.
Commissioner Kasher,
Yes.
Commissioner Wasserman,
Yes.
Commissioner Wynn,
Yes,
Chair Remke.
Yes,
This motion passes.
thanks. Okay, we'll take 11. You want us to take 11 first? Okay, we'll take 11 first.
All right.
Are there any, ooh, I forgot to ask for public comment on that consent calendar. Sorry about that. Was there any public comment on the consent calendar before we voted on it? My legal counsel, you're supposed to jump up and down. Okay. Seeing none, that is then going to be moved on. So now with number 11, do we have any questions? Is there any public comment on number 11? Okay, I move to approve item 11.
Second.
Commissioner Kasher,
Yes.
Commissioner Wynn,
yes,
Chair Remke.
Yes,
This motion passes.
okay. Thank you. Oh, he's going to get them, thanks.
gotta give Tyler rubber bands.
I'll ask maybe for Commissioner Wasserman to just state, he has to identify, why he's recusing.
Thank you. I intended to state,
Oh, sorry.
but I was going to do it afterwards because I don't know if it's required to do it first, but I was going to do it afterwards so as not to have any sort of impact on the commission as possible. I recused myself and left the room because I believe, and I didn't research this, but I believe that this campaign paid some rent to an entity that I may have a small interest in. And while it may have been attributable to me maybe $10 or who knows what, that's money. So I recused myself and left the room.
Okay, thank you. All right, let's go to item number 3. Are there any questions or comments regarding item number 3?
That would be me. I have continuing sort of overall policy concerns, and they have to do with determining, what is the legally permissible role of a political party committee in the context of, Prop 34 and these sort of situations where I think we discussed this in the open portion of the hearing on Berry Hill, where at some point it's really not possible to expect that a donor will not have a reasonable belief that a contribution they make to a county party is going to go to a specific candidate. I think in the order we did or something along the line, there was something about an FPPC argument that we would look at these as improper if the donor has took it a step further from the actual communication to reasonable belief that that's what would happen, beyond the idea, the carve out of just hope, like you would just donate and hope it goes to the candidate, which as a practical matter just doesn't seem like that's going to go there. So that was one comment I had about this and about this whole scenario, because we're going to see this again and again and again. I think we'll see it a lot. Probably, and this is my analysis, maybe more with one party than the other because of the way they function differently in terms of the fundraising. But we will see that still on both major parties, because at least in my own personal experience, I've seen a number of special elections occur where it may be a safe seat Republican or a safe seat Democrat, and the involvement of the political party committee becomes extremely critical. That leads into the actual, that was more commentary and concern that, I want to make sure that these sorts of discussions are occurring in the open, as it's not things I can talk to my fellow commissioners about, outside of the public, because it's a concern of mine.
Is the concern, just so I'm clear, because I wasn't here for Berry Hill, that it's happening and you think that it's a problem because there's more coordination than we're able to show or prove, or that it's just a reality of life and we should review how we're looking at these?
Well, I think it's a little both. One is that if we take the position that it's going to be a violation if you have reason to know that that's what's going to happen, then that's going to basically shut down participation and I think infringe on people's rights in any number of situations where there's this, depending on this, of course, the size of these districts that are in competition. If a particular county committee is only covering maybe 2 races, and you put in money, that money is going to those 2 candidates.
Right.
I mean, it's not quite the same as something that maybe diffuse across the state. But even then, the reality is you have targeted districts where there are competitive registrations, there are declined estates, that each party is essentially knows these information that they have to know before they allocate their resources. And they take those things to their donors and they say, these are the targeted races where we can gain we can gain or lose or whatnot. In this case, it's really more about supermajorities, I think, than really changing control at this point. So I think that sort of interpretation, I think, is overbroad, because if you put that standard as have a reason to know, yes, it could be too much of a safe harbor.
This case is about reason to know. I think this case is obviously clear earmarking.
Well, we're going to get to that part second. But again, I really feel that for me to have this sort of discussion with my fellow commissioners and staff, the only place to really have it is right here and in this context. So
I have concerns about this case too, but I sense that my concerns might be going in a different direction.
That's
yours.
very possible. That's very possible. And I welcome hearing those. The chair gets the last word on that one. Let's see. I mean, it also goes to the question of, at what point we're going to be determining coordination when, again, folks know this is where it's going to be. In this particular case, I was going through the numbers, and there were a whole bunch of contributions. But I think and maybe Ms. West, if you could just hit it the nail on the head for me. What we're really talking about is the $4,230 odd that was directed to this county party committee and utilized not for member communications, but for a broader radio ad, which, although one could argue that reaches out to members, clearly it goes much broader than that. I mean, whoever listens to the radio. That's really all we're really focusing on, or because in this particular case, we've chosen to approach this with a number of counts rather than certain consolidation of counts. So we selected this many counts to proceed upon. And from that basis, then determined where our fines would be, the number of our fines, and then the severity.
That's true. Actually, in the definition of member communication, it excludes public advertising. So that's well within the scope. Radio ads are considered part of that statute and not included in member communications. So that is exactly what we went after in this case, was the going beyond the membership communications that went to the public. And that was the focus.
So if a $4,200 violation generates a, what was the full extent of the fine? $23,000 fine because of the way we chose to approach the number of counts and then the comparison with some of the prior cases, in particular Berry Hill, which was very interesting facts on itself. Yeah, even beyond, we could differ on how we compare the two cases, but okay.
But I think you,
And that's
Sorry.
and that's for all the parties.
Yeah, I was just
when you
gonna
say the
say-
23,000, you're breaking it in. You have the gift in there. You have the over the limit contribution, which they also gave the max already to the committee. So if you want to combine those to actually see what the over the limit contribution was, then you can put it in total of adding what they gave to the committee that was legal plus this. So it's really however you want to state the numbers. But yes, it's for over the limit contributions as part of an organized fashion to contribute beyond what was fair and legal.
And the over the limit is not just the 4,200 then. You're looking at the other numbers as well, or are you?
No, I'm
No,
looking
you're
at,
just
they
looking at
made the
4,200.
contribution and of 3,900, I believe it was. And then they also did the 4,200 whatnot.
Right. Because sometimes I'm sort of on one side or the other about this because it's a certain amount of, I guess, prosecutorial discretion about how to package the, for lack of a better way, the charging package, et cetera. And I had pointed out back, and for the chair's benefit, in the Berry Hall matter, that if you have one of these violations involving a party committee, you're going to have a cascade. You're not going to have a single violation. You're going to have, basically have sort of like bowling pins.
Mm-hmm.
So,
but it's like with any laundered campaign contribution case, we look at the party's involvement and knowledge to figure out who in the chain to charge. So that's really the determiner. It's not necessarily the amount. If you look at the local laundered campaign contribution cases, those can be local limits of $250. So if you bundle 10, it doesn't seem like a giant amount of money, but it's still laundered campaign contributions, and the knowledge of the source, the true source of the contributions, as well as the intermediary and the recipient, is all taken into consideration when figuring out who to charge.
so in determining, compliant behavior that's going to be in compliance with the Political Reform Act, if it was money that was given, a donor has maxed out to candidate. Donor gives money to the party committee, and that money is solely used for member communications, get GOTV of Democrat or Republican, whatever party they are. We're not involved.
No.
So I just want to make sure that the fix is kind of clear as well. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, I would just, first of all, as far as the penalties, and I understand Commissioner Wasserman's point, but if you look at page 15 of the stipulation, we really are talking about 4 different parties to this, broken down to reach that total with very different acts in it, and also emphasizing each player's role in the overall violation. So I think it's different than when you just say it's 23,000. Second of all, I would just kind of continue on that member communication issue, because from my point of view, that is an enormous loophole in this whole scheme of contributions and contribution limits that I think this case illustrates should be reviewed. And I would, for one, like to see us look at what can happen or not happen, because basically, as in this case, there is earmarking of funds, and then it's not a violation because we call it member communication.
Well, if I may.
Sure.
Your first point about the number of parties, et cetera, I see what you're saying. The second aspect, we can characterize it as a loophole, certainly. But it's one that's set up.
But how else would we characterize it? I mean, the whole
I-
idea of, like you said, Prop 34 was sold as contribution limits. And then at the same time, we put this giant, however,
But exactly, but I need to make that clear that we did put the giant, the voters put the giant, however, whether you feel they were misled in the process or whatnot, because I see there's a personal analysis on how that functioned, which it was completely fair to do. But it's not the same as not as
sure
the
we
same as there
knew where it
being.
was headed. Is that what I would, I understand there was a purpose behind this, and in the bigger picture of 85 312 in the sense of communication to members. But then once you throw in political parties, I think it's a different issue. And again, I just say all you have to do is look at this case to illustrate their contribution limits, and then there are contribution limits.
I think that's also accurate. I'm simply saying that it's not the same as a loophole because of the absence of action or a failure to, enforce or et cetera. If it's a loophole that can be corrected in a particular fashion.
Well, how
as
do you
opposed
think
to
the loophole that we've now called it?
No, you see, that's the
glad
thing.
I got
You've
using
defined it
it.
as a loophole, and
You said it. No, just kidding. Kidding. I guess the question, I think, is where is this going to go now, especially when we look at the way primaries are and the top two, and what does that mean as far as member communication goes going down the road? I think it's a whole different ballgame. And I think that goes to your point about what does the race look like?
that's right.
And so I would say, I don't know what, if anything, can be done. I think it's worthy of further analysis. And if there's going to be communication, fine, but what does that mean? And are we all aware and accepting that it really is a way to earmark money through a political party to another candidate over the contribution limits? Okay. But number two, I think this case for me also illustrates the other issue, which is coordination and what that means. Because you kept
Right.
using the term something like should have known or reasonable. I can't remember what the term was you were.
The term that I think we actually used previously was hopes or reasonably believes. And I'm not sure about the conjunction I just used there. Hope was one of them, and reason believe was the other. Yeah, and I think you've pretty much focused in on that. And between your comments and Ms. West's additions, I really don't have anything else to say about the topic. But this was the opportunity to discuss this particular area of policy, and I'm not advocating whether, quote, to close up, tighten up, change. I'm just saying that that's, from my perspective, that's the same as anything else that we deal with that any one of us may or not agree with, but it's what is there and what we must deal with.
You're right. It is what is there. Is the question I guess I would ask is it what people anticipated? Is it what the voters anticipated when they passed Prop 34? And is it what we anticipate in light of the other changes that have occurred since then, for example, with the primaries and the top two? But, and
I will submit now.
Any other questions, comments from the commissioners? Any questions or comments from the public? Okay, is there a motion?
I move approval of item number 3.
Second.
Commissioner Kasher,
Yes.
Commissioner Wasserman,
Yes.
Commissioner Wynn,
Yep.
Chair Rumke.
Yes.
This motion passes.
Okay, so item 7. Are there any questions or comments from the commissioners?
Yes, Madam Chair.
Please, Commissioner Wasserman.
Before I address the matter of Colin Wong Martinson, I'm sorry, I don't know how to say the name. I wanted to make a disclosure, which I do not feel that there's an actual conflict that would require me to abstain or recuse myself from this matter. As a bit of background, the particular position I occupy on this commission has a sort of an odd statutory origin. And basically it's because the controller appoints this position, but when you have these other members, and I forget how many it has to be, if it's the Attorney General and Treasurer's the other appointments are all of one party, the controller doesn't have absolute discretion to simply appoint someone who's qualified at his or her determination. They actually have to, by statute, there's a process where they get a list from another major political party. In this case, it was the Republican Party. And if that list is turned over in an appropriate amount of time, then the controller really is limited to that list for appointment. That's my basic understanding. I was on that list from the Republican Party to the controller, and I was appointed by the controller, who is now the treasurer, for whom this respondent is the chief of staff. I don't believe I have any material financial interest in this case at all. I don't think it's possible I could have met this person. I don't remember. I apologize to the person if I ever met them, because I can't remember how to say the name correctly. So I don't feel that it is reasonable, and I've been thinking about this in terms of like the judicial canons of ethics and a reasonable person's determination of whether or not there would be an appearance of impropriety. And also balanced it against the idea that, we have an obligation to decide the matters in front of us, particularly when there's something, again, sort of a policy sort of statement that I wish to make in relation to this kind of fact pattern. So I've had discussion with counsel about this, and
we agree there's not a conflict under the Act.
Right. So, I usually approach this as, here's the floor, right? And that is what the legal issues are. And then, what is sort of the reasonable interpretation? And then sometimes I usually go a little bit higher, but I usually don't have a countervailing question of I need to make a statement about how I feel about the policies related to how we approach this kind of case, which is, in my case, a self-reporting case. So in weighing those out, I have determined to go forward. I just want to make that disclosure on the record ahead of time, because I think that should come out first, rather than, he voted on this, and oh, by the way, he was appointed by this person's boss, etc. I also want to make it clear I've had no contact with any of the parties, ex-party or otherwise, because I don't. So that's my statement, and then now I want to address the actual substance, unless someone has something else they want to point out to me that would change my mind about participation, because I'm
going to leave it to our sound legal counsel and you.
Thank you. Okay. So the policy aspect of this that I wanted to make a statement about, and is also I would like to be able to vote on, is the idea that of how we lay our incentives, and certainly in terms of punishing behavior and sending a message. We have that. We have our fines. We go after these things, etc. But we also have different levels. And in this particular matter, on the facts presented here, and I have to say, I very much appreciate the way facts are presented, because I couldn't have these questions and have these concerns if I didn't have a complete set of facts from which to draw my questions and potentially my conclusions. So I want to commend you for doing that, because I can't have my disagreement if the issues aren't there before me. I only know what's before me. Yeah, I mean, it's a fundamental fairness, and I appreciate that. So my concern was with, I considered, okay, this is a serious position with long range impacts, can have major impacts upon the entire state. A chief of staff or a constitutional officer. On the flip side of that, I also looked at the circumstances as presented, and I accepted them as presented, which were essentially that this person who had just come in got this memo for approval of some sort of contract, and I don't recall the value of the contract, and okayed it and passed it on. Correct me if I'm misrecollecting, because
1.9 billion in general fund obligation bond.
So huge amount of money. Which I'm not sure if actually is part of our analysis of these things, because we deal with, decisions about a bench in a dog park or whatnot. But the way
impacts your heightened awareness of the situation. That's what I would say.
My heightened awareness. Yes, and in any case, so the individual believed that there was stock in Bank of America that his mother had that he would eventually inherit. And we don't play in that zone because those are possibilities we never know. And then apparently when he went to go do his actual Form 700, he determined that no, mom had been really generous and put it in joint ownership between the two of them. And it was in the sum of about $11,000. Is that fair? Not 1.1 million, not
11,700 in stock.
Yeah. Okay. And then this individual reported that on their Form 700 and then self-reported their violation to the FPPC. Is that a fair sum of that? I mean,
Yes,
correct me if I'm
after
wrong, because I don't want to
his-
proceed on a
After
misunderstanding.
his counsel explained to him the conflict, yes.
Right, because I'd run to my counsel too, really quickly. Yeah. So, I have a concern about, incentivizing disclosure. I do have a concern based on, well, I have other concerns as well, but we want people in these positions not to make these kinds of acts. On the other hand, we want them to come out as quickly as possible because we can't be everywhere. And we really don't want these things coming out 7 years later or 5 years down the road, et cetera. We want these things corrected, disclosed, and if there's any sort of other waterfall effect from participating in that decision, then that needs to be dealt with, and that's dealt with by someone else other than us. But I really am in favor of incentivizing self-reporting. And that's a statement I wanted to make, and that's how I'm going to vote, unless I'm persuaded otherwise.
Any other comments? Ms. West, anything from you?
Yes. Actually, it's a terrific point because we take self-reporting very seriously. And in fact, if you amend your campaign statements before we contact you or you file your SEI before we've contacted you, that is a big factor in how we consider your case. We consider it not only in fines, but what qualifies you for streamline versus a warning letter. The problem with conflicts of interest is that they are so serious, and the commission in their history has taken them so seriously that there really is no fine below $2,500. So we did take this into consideration because when you look at the factors in the regulation, you're looking at willful, you're looking at good faith, and those are the reason the fine is $2,500. Now, if the commission in the future directs us to go below that floor, as to what we settle a conflict of interest count for, then that's something that we would do. But as of now, in the past, the commission's direction has always been $2,500 is the lowest you will get for a conflict of interest under the act, because if you knew enough to put it on your Form 700, you knew enough not to participate in the decision.
Right, and we're assuming certain facts. Right, because it depends on the facts.
Admitted to them.
Yeah,
Yes.
it also depends on the particular facts as to where they fall.
Right.
And actually, I think I'm generally in agreement with that approach.
But you see a lot of conflict of interest cases that are $4,500.
That's right, and I see what you said. Okay, let's go to the 2,500 level because of the lack of the willfulness, the lack of this and that. And I've just been thinking about how over the last 2 years, I and the commission have been approaching cases and fines, and when we've determined we'll fine them less or something, and it really didn't, in my mind, didn't really create the incentives that we were trying to say. To try to say, you will get a lesser fine, really didn't do a whole lot because, frankly, we just don't really have a whole lot of range for our fines. So it's we fine you. I mean, depending on, of course, the circumstances of the individual respondent, it may or may not be incentivizing. But I do see that you did approach this with factors of mitigation,
Right.
et cetera. And I'm totally aware of that and appreciative of it.
Yeah, and it's the same that the commission approved for Tom Hammond, which was also newly appointed to his position and hadn't even received his ethics training yet. But the facts were very similar, and his fine was $2,500, and that's what we used as our benchmark.
I read that one again, and I forget, did he self-report?
He didn't self-report, but he cooperated fully. He didn't. I don't think he realized.
I think that was the distinction I made between the two when I was trying to figure that out for myself. Because again, I said, well, although we're each entitled to sort of adjust how we approach things over time and experience, I say, well, I think that was probably one I participated in, and why did I go at the 2,500 level, or et cetera. So that was probably the distinction that
And
I
I think
made.
the difference for Mr. Hammond is he didn't have staff at hand to remind him that he had a conflict. So I think he was a well-intentioned person that
Right.
cooperated fully once made aware of the rules.
The staff at hand issues, I think, a little different, but yeah.
Commissioner Wynn?
Thanks very much, Galena. I don't want to put you on the spot, but I would love for you to, at some point, come back to us about whether or not you think the 2,500 is the right minimum, or if we should consider, in some cases, going below that floor. I mean, I'm comfortable with it right now, but just in light of this conversation, I'd love to hear your thoughts for a future meeting. Thank you.
And I'll be brief on this. Because by and large, if I go back over the record of my analysis and voting in these kinds of cases, there have been these sorts of things that I felt were particularly egregious, one for the violation, but two for the circumstances that went around it that were presented in the facts. So I'm not sure, I'm not really actually talking about adjusting the floor per se, but that because we are a body that looks at each case individually and we look back to try to have some consistency, but we may have a case that at least for one commissioner or two, or maybe more, might feel that set of facts is sufficiently different to depart from whatever the general the baseline is. So that doesn't take away from Commissioner Wynn's interest in that, but I just wanted to be clear on what exactly I am saying and what I am not saying. So thank you.
Okay, is there any other comment? Any public comment on item number 7? Seeing none, I move to approve item 7.
Second. Yes.
Commissioner Wasserman,
No.
Commissioner Wynn,
Yes.
Chair Rumpke.
Yes.
This motion passes.
Okay, item 9, Power Pack. Questions or comments from the commissioners? Any public comment on item number 9?
I move approval of item number 9.
I second.
Commissioner Kasher,
I'm going to abstain from voting on this one.
Commissioner Wasserman,
Yes.
Commissioner Wynn,
Yes.
Chair Rumpke.
Yes.
This motion passes.
Item 37. Questions or comments from the commissioners? Any public comment on item 37? Okay,
I move approval of item number 37.
You need a
oh,
second.
second.
Commissioner Kasher,
Abstain.
Commissioner Wasserman,
Yes.
Commissioner Wynn,
Yes.
Chair Rumpke.
Yes.
This motion passes.
Just wondering if we shouldn't ask if there's any questions on your staff report, just because we have one set of having to come back. That's okay with everyone. I think it's worthy of kind of just discussing where we're at and where we're going and what your office is doing, because we do have, as everyone can see from the numbers, this incredible workload as a result of the $50 annual fee issue. And I just want to applaud you and your staff. Particularly, I know there's Bridget, Mike, Garrett, Katie, Chloe, and Lydia who are handling these cases and doing an excellent job and moving through 2,400 cases in the best possible way we can. As everyone knows and is stated in the report, this is a mandated action for us from the referrals from the Secretary of State's office. So it is not as if we could just pass on these. We do have to enforce these, for one thing. Number two, obviously, there is some logic and policy behind why the legislature adopted this notion of the $50 fee penalty and enforcement, which clearly helps clean the books at the Secretary of State's office, gets rid of some of the white noise over there on Cal Access when a committee has in fact terminated, and allows us or helps us with our workload, not having to track down committees that are terminated but haven't officially done so, looking for their statements. So again, I just want to point out, I think you guys are handling this great. I appreciate that you brought the Streamline program to us to handle these several months ago, and that you're now moving these through. I think we had talked, Glenn, at one point, and you gave me an estimate of hopefully 6 months to process all 2,400 to get them into a stage of which avenue they're going. Is that fair?
That's true. We're hoping to have everything. Right now we have 2 seasonal clerks that are helping us full time for 3 months, and they're helping us getting everything into an avenue. So that's our goal right now, is to take all 2,400 and to find out the ones that are in need of being terminated, the ones that are in need of being fined, and the ones that actually complied. So we're working on our communication with the Secretary of State's office to most efficiently update our records and theirs. And we're making great progress. So I'm very proud of them. They've all worked their butts off on this.
Yeah, it is great.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
wanted to echo something that the chair said about, it seems like it's this relatively small or minor idea, but the task is huge. And it goes back to one of the larger picture of what we're trying to do in terms of cleaning up things, because in order to effectuate the disclosure, I think the signal to noise ratio, the white noise issue, how do you find something if there's all these other things that really aren't going to apply to what you are looking for? I mean, we clean up the data, better data in, better data out. So, I mean, there's certainly going to be pains to the whole process, certainly for all folks involved. And people will disagree about whether this is the best way, but this is the way. Again, this is what we have, and we are going to do this and do this well.
That's actually a terrific point. A lot of people have belittled this program. I know there's a lot of word out there on the street that our time is being sucked up by the $50 fee program. But if you look at the value in the long run, the city clerks, the county clerks, the Secretary of State's office, our staff, everybody pursuing committees that haven't filed since 2004, they lost their election and they never intended to run again. And to clean all of that up and to make it to where people don't have to spend their time at every single level of the state, and to make it more efficient. So once we're more efficient, yes, it hurts right now, but it's going to be so much easier and good referrals in the future.
And this is really a one-time huge hit, and we anticipate each subsequent year from the Secretary of State. I mean, this is getting really, if I have to use the term backlog, this would be a backlog of cases as far as the referral goes for us.
It's true. This should be the only giant referral with all of the extra nonsense involved. And then once we get through the nonsense and we really clean it up, then the next year's referral should be so much easier and better.
And then just real briefly on the remaining cases, the regular run-of-the-mill cases we get on sworn complaints, proactive and non-filers. Your perception right now, or and I think I've looked at the numbers as well, those cases are moving at the same speed in which they have always moved. And I think our general goal here, as I understand it, has been to finish a case in a year or less. And the goal is, as in many processing administrations, that it does so 90% of the cases. And that's what we've hit over the last several years. And there's no reason to believe we're not going to hit that again. Is that?
No reason.
All right. So it's great. Thank you for moving them. Any other questions on the enforcement from the public? Yes.
I'm sorry, with the Commission's indulgence, I'm Chris Reynolds. I'm the Chief of the Political Reform Division of the Secretary of State's Office, and I just wanted to say publicly thank you for the help that we're getting and the cooperation. It's a collaborative effort.
It is, and we thank you as well. I know you've been a big part of this, Chris, and thank you for all your work, and we'll continue to try to get this done and move through. Thank you.
Madam Chair. I just want to thank Mr. Reynolds also. He and I had a phone conversation. I don't know if it was when I first came on the commission or shortly thereafter, but it was a very helpful conversation for me to understand some of the issues in terms of how we're going to work together and things like that. So I really appreciate that. And I appreciate you coming out.
Okay, thank you, Galena. All right, so jumping back to item 54, which is adoption of the amendment to regulation 18531, which is the FPPC's conflict of interest code. And just before Linda gets started, I just want to, again, kind of point out the staff. As you guys know, the FPPC is the code reviewing body for over 200 state agencies and 600 multi-county agencies. And Linda and her staff in the technical assistance division have to review all those codes and move them through. And it has been quite a process, and there was a bit of an different ways to do it, and I think we're really on track now. And so I thank Linda and all her PRCs for doing a great job on that, and I think we're right on target now. So, and here is our code.
Absolutely. Linda Cassidy with the Technical Assistance Division. Good morning. This is the amendment to the, as the chair said, our conflict of interest code, which is contained in regulation 18351. There's very minor changes. We're adding the 2 new positions to the agency, which are clearly should be in the code, the External Affairs Division Manager and the Project Manager. We had public comment. This has also been tentatively reviewed by the Attorney General's office. They're fine with the amendment. So I think it should be smooth sailing. And so I ask for your approval.
Any questions? Yes, Commissioner Wasserman?
Could an item pass? You know, just one question with respect to line 16 of 18351. I noticed that
You're on page
I am on page 1.
Page 1.
And it says individuals in designated positions, and we stricken shall and say must. Is that just an attempt to make it clear to staff as opposed to using sort of the typical legal language of shall versus may?
I'll take the hit for that.
See, another good example of the fact that we're having our conversations openly as opposed to, oh, I could have called the chair.
In many legal circles, it is argued, and I believe accurate, that shall is vague and the appropriate terms are must and or will. It's really about this being a mandated requirement. So yes.
So it's part of the movement to improve the way we communicate
It
legal
certainly
language.
is.
That's my goal. It's called.
You know, each chair
plain
makes their mark
English.
in many different ways. This would be one of the many ways.
I mean,
to
how
make
many
your mark.
times do you walk around during the day and say, I shall do that. Thank you so much. I mean, so. Yeah.
That's fine. It was just a question. I'm ready to move.
Well, is there any public comment on item 54? Okay, seeing none. Is there a motion?
Yes, I will move to adopt the amended regulation, conflict of interest code for the Fair Political Practice Commission.
I'll second.
Commissioner Kasher,
Yes.
Commissioner Wasserman,
Yes.
Commissioner Wynn,
Yes.
Chair Emke.
Yes.
This motion passes.
Thank you, Linda. Okay, let's move to item 55, which are the executive staff reports. We've already done the enforcement. We can go ahead and start with the legislative report. If there are any questions, I just want to highlight what I think you all already know, which is a couple of changes since the report came out. Number one, AB 1083, the ability for us to contract with Stockton has been signed by the governor, so that is a possibility. SB 21 AB 990. Oh, actually, that hasn't been amended yet. So SB 21 and AB 1544 have been significantly amended since the report came out. So just so you're aware of that and are looking at the current draft, which I think everyone has. So with that, questions, comments? Suki, anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, I just wanted to add that AB 1544 is actually a brand new bill that was introduced in the middle of July. And SB 21, again, like the chair said, has been significantly amended.
I would just also add and thank Suki because she has worked extensively with the author's offices on some of these bills, in particular SB 21, to address some concerns we had, some interpretation issues and the like. So the version it is in now, I think, is a much better version.
Mhm.
Thank you, Suki. So since this is the last time we'll be meeting before the legislature adjourns, I'm just wondering, are we taking a position? Are you suggesting that we, take a position on either of these bills as amended?
No, I'm not suggesting a position on either of those bills.
Have we been asked? I mean, have the authors asked us to take positions? Are they comfortable with our technical support?
They haven't formally asked us for a position. They've been asking for our opinion on drafts of the bill and things like that, but they haven't formally asked for a position on the bill, as far as I know.
Okay.
Yeah, I have not been contacted. I did speak with Assemblyman Cooley on AB 1544. And again, in the original draft, expressed some concerns. I would still have some concerns on AB 1544, as I think everyone can see. It's about behested payments. Behested payments are an extremely confusing area, and especially as drafted, because it's in a section that says, what is a contribution? This is not a contribution, it is something else, and therefore you'll have a reporting requirement all under what is not a contribution. Now we have, this is not a contribution, this is a behested payment, but this behested payment does not need to be reported. So we were strongly encouraging at a minimum some changes in the language to really just help this area overall. Those were not accepted. So the issue now is really just the substantive issue. The one thing it does do is right now, members, officials have to report when they solicit or request payments from government agencies if it goes to anything or anyone other than another government agency. This would delete that reporting requirement, therefore delete some disclosure on when an official requests payments to be made, including if those payments from a government agency go to any entity, including private corporations.
If I could just follow up with that real quickly. So, we do read almost daily, certainly weekly, about the behested payments being made kind of up and down the state and kind of every branch of government. And I do agree with the chair that behested payment laws and regulations are very confusing. And I would love for us to, at some point in the near future, come up with a more rational plan for dealing with behested payments.
Well, we have some draft language we're happy to share with anyone who'd like to carry it.
Okay.
But I think that's a good idea. And I do think this has been a good exercise, at least for us internally, about how can we make this more clear? How can this be better drafted section, which again is one of our goals, or at least definitely a goal of mine while in this position, is to clean things up and make it easier for people to understand what their obligation is and for people to understand what they're seeing when they do in fact see the disclosure.
Mm-hmm. Hi, Suki. I had a question, and
Sure.
thank you for all your work on this. My question relates to AB 594. The commission in April agreed to sponsor that, to support that bill. And I noticed that it was amended in June, and there may have been other subsequent amendments. I'm curious if you were able to report on the substance of those amendments. Maybe they were kind of insignificant changes that wouldn't impact our support. And then a follow-up question is, I'm just curious about our process. If the commission takes a position in support of a particular bill and there are then subsequent changes to that bill, kind of what's our process for handling that, if we need to revisit that decision or not?
Okay, I'll talk a little bit about the amendments first and then about the process.
Thanks.
Once a bill is amended after a position is taken. The amendments to AB 594 were just to increase that recipient committee threshold to $2,000. after meeting with other groups, such as Common Cause, they were not supportive of raising other thresholds besides that one. So that's why just only that one was raised. And it was also amended this week just to make conforming amendments to other sections of the Act to go along with raising that threshold to $2,000. And so the commission can revisit the position at any time if they would like to. I think that those amendments are still in line with the position that was voted on before.
So the latest, the only change since we voted is the conforming amendments. Because the threshold was already raised, or as we voted on it, that we would support that.
Actually, the vote was kind of a mixed decision. It was the thresholds were not raised in the version that was voted on at the meeting, but the commission agreed that if they were raised, they would support that version of the bill also.
Right.
Yeah.
And we would generally bring it back if it was something that was.
We thought it was significant. We would bring attention to it.
Right.
Okay.
So to be clear, we made a vote and said we would go whichever way the vote was tallied, because I don't think it was one of our unanimous ones.
4-1.
It was 4-1. And it ended up being amended, but not to the full extent of what we said we would do.
Exactly.
Just in one category. The other categories were not also raised in terms of threshold.
Exactly.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Actually, do have
Commissioner Wasserman?
a couple other questions. Coming back to Assembly Bill 1544 and Senate Bill 21 and Commissioner Wynn's observation about the end of session, et cetera. And we talked about what some of the concerns we have are and what we have done to communicate those concerns. And I'm just curious, there are two other questions I have is, ought we opine formally, and are we in a position where we can? I mean, because what I gather from what I'm getting and the additional documentation we got this morning, which is the latest amendment, that we have some concerns about what this is going to create, what we're going to have to deal with if this goes forward. Now, I understand that the legislative process, well, I'm not sure I should say I understand the legislative process. I'll just say it's the legislative process. And the question is whether or not it's prudent to take a position, whether we have enough to take a position, and ranging from whether we've given enough notice to whether or not we have enough information, and whether we must. Yeah, that was a deliberate use of language.
I think it's whether we will. I'll comment on that. Where I'm happy to hear if someone wants to make a motion or wants to discuss any bill further. I do think it is part of the concern or the process, as Suki pointed out. AB 1544 was only introduced during recess or right before recess, like the week before recess, obviously, and then just amended again on Monday. It has an urgency clause in order to get around some of the deadlines it's facing at this point. So it's tricky. It's tricky when things move quickly and are amended late in the game, and we have little time to analyze and or discuss. So we can continue to discuss, raise concerns, vote, whatever everyone wants to do. I don't know if I, for one, feel like we have the sufficient analysis raising points, at least not written down from legal counsel. But obviously I have some opinions. But we could also bring back any and or all bills with the notion that we want to vote. Next time, of course, it'd be out of the legislature, but it would be before the governor signed it most likely. So at least we could have some impact as far as from an agency position, whether we think this is something that should be signed or not. That's kind of our options, I guess I would say.
Which puts us at a attempt at a kill switch position rather than.
Well, again, I don't think our concerns are silent, or our concerns, I should say, our legal division's concerns, who are the experts in this area about any bill. I've definitely shared some of my concerns, as I said, on AB 1544, limiting disclosure. And quite frankly, I mean, SB 21, it's a lot better, but I think it's, if anyone wants my opinion, I think it's a lot of work. And at the end of the day, My understanding is we're really going to ultimately get disclosure from potentially 2 nonprofits. So I don't know why they have the limiting issue about this new rule on nonprofits showing who donated to them if their donor went on the trip and paid $1,000 is limited to nonprofits that spend a third of their expenses on these kind of trips. I think I understood the issue to be based on the newspaper articles and the like, that the public was concerned that there were trips at all members were going on where possibly interested parties were going and paying to go that weren't disclosed. I don't know what the limiting of the 1/3 nonprofit is. That's my feeling. I think it would be a much better bill with a lot more effective disclosure if they took out that provision. Because again, it's a lot of work for 2 nonprofits.
I have a question. This is just a somewhat related. In prior sessions, is it typically the case where we will only kind of weigh in on a bill if we're approached by the bill author?
It just depends on what the commission would like to do every year. Some years we don't take any positions. Some years we decide to take positions on our own. Sometimes we do it only when the author approaches us. So it's kind of been a mixture of all of those.
Okay.
Yes.
So this is just a comment, but I am hearing that maybe there is some interest in the commission members and maybe getting a little bit more involved in legislation. I've had an interest, which I've talked about it almost every month. But so we're too late in the process right now, in my mind, because we don't really have the analyses in front of us, and the session will end really before we meet again. So I'm just hoping that maybe next year, at this time, we don't find ourselves in the same position, that if you see a bill that we really ought to take a position on because it's important to the work of the Political Reform Act, that we hear about a little early and we take, maybe take a position.
I think that's a fair statement. But again, I think in this situation, I don't know what bill, any one bill someone's referring to, but SB 21 and AB 1544 were amended Monday. Yeah. I mean, we don't really have much of a choice. I think if they were amended, before a recess, we would have had that in the analysis as they stand now, with either clear points of concern or clear points of support. So I don't really want to put it on Suki or the legal division that they haven't done it, because again, I know they have extensive conversations trying to address agency concerns on some of these bills. But for us, we are our hands are tied somewhat by the process itself and when bills are amended.
Yeah, I just wanted to echo Commissioner Wynn's comment. I also would gladly and welcome any additional input on legislation, and if we could maybe give some thought to steps that can be taken so that some of these can, SB 21, for example, was introduced in December of 2014, and there's clearly been revisions and amendments, but even getting, and I know that was included in our materials, but maybe having some directed and pointed questions about the issues raised by some of the bills so that we could have some further discussions or deeper discussions about, from a policy perspective, of the positions that we might take as a commission, and maybe that could help inform your comments in dealing with bill authors and staff, but then also help us kind of come to a consensus around where we are on some of these kind of really critical issues to our work.
Definitely.
Yeah.
We can definitely do that.
Yeah.
Anybody else? Commissioner Wasserman?
So with respect to if we don't, well, let me jump in. If we aren't taking a position because we don't have sufficient information, because they just hit us with these things now, and it goes to the governor, if it does get passed and goes to the governor, and at that point, I'm trying to recall, how do we express ourselves? Do we eventually just submit a report to the governor, a letter indicating our support or our concerns with this bill, etc.? Because at that point, it's no longer a question of, well, we agree with certain substantive directions, but like when I'm voting, I may agree with the substantive direction of a ballot initiative, believe it or not. But I might say this is not going to work the way it's been presented. So as much as I may be in favor of more parks or anything good, I would say no. Is that sort of the process? We send something that says, we've done this evaluation, we've discussed these concerns. They did not make it into the bill. We still think they're important, and we think this issue should be addressed further in the legislature. Is that basically what we do?
We would write a letter to the governor with the concerns that we might have with the bill.
Mm-hmm. And at this stage, even though we aren't taking a position, we can continue to communicate with the proponent and send them something instead of maybe our whatever our usual more informal communication is, but a concern that we still have. We have concerns that have been expressed at least by some members of the commission. We have not had an opportunity to fully analyze this as a full commission. Mm-hmm. Please take these things into consideration, because we hope we can resolve these before we have to send something yay or nay down the road. Because certainly we don't want to create a confrontation that's unnecessary. But I mean, there's a reason why we're opining, right?
Right. Is there anything anyone feels that they want Suki to address with the various offices at this point, or is it just really too hard to tell at this point because of the notice issue?
Well, I think your point about, we worked really hard with the regulation to sort of say, okay, this section is where you look for this info, and this section is where you look for this info. So why would you want to now start conflating that even further in the actual bill? But that's about as far as I can go, because I've looked at some of these things, but I have not, like the rest of the commission. This was the amended version of something that was just offered, so I can't fairly analyze it either.
Okay, any other comments on the ledge report? Okay, we also have the legal, thank you, Suki.
Thank you.
The legal report, and here I just want to highlight our new section, which I hope everyone appreciates, which starts on page 9 at the very end, called Upcoming Regulations. And Hyla has pushed strongly for this idea, and I think it's a great idea, which is to try to give a roadmap of some of the things we are working on internally right now. None of these are, I don't even think the top 10 is out for notice right now. And I think this goes to the conversation we were just having about as much input as possible, as early on as possible. And this is part of that goal here. So then other than the first reg, the others are not public or finalized, but these are ideas and notions that have come up through the legal division and other divisions about things that could improve the act or our regulations interpreting the act. So go ahead, Hyla.
Yep, these are some of the regulations, and some of the ones we're looking at were to get ready for the campaign season in 2016, because generally the FPPC likes to handle the campaign regulations in the off year and then leave them set for the election year, not be changing them. And in September, we're planning to bring a new regulation under the top contributor disclosure lists. Those came in with SB 27 and require a committee that's raised $1 million to list for a ballot measure or for IEs on a candidate to list its top 10 donors. And the proposed regulation is going to add that if on their list of top 10 donors, there's a committee like Good Government California, some state general purpose committee with a generic name, then they'll have to, a hover over will show who gave to that committee, the top donors to that committee, just so people can tell.
Hopefully get to the true source.
Just get some more information, right? And related to SB 27, we'll do another regulation amendment. We were getting some inquiries from Washington, D.C. law firms who are reading the multipurpose organization regulation, asking whether a 501c4 couldn't give to a federal PAC and not identify its donors. And to which we said, no, the purpose of that bill was so that the donors would be identified in that situation. But we agree that we're making some minor amendments to the multipurpose organization regulation to make that very clear that a federal PAC is subject to those MPO reporting and trackback rules, and they have to send notices to their donors. You know, if it's a big donor, saying they might have to file and disclose their donors also. Then in October, we were proposing to look at bring the independent expenditure regulations up and proposing to consolidate. There's currently 2 of them. We're proposing to consolidate them into one regulation because they have virtually the same language. And these independent expenditure regulations are the guidelines that ensure that political expenditures made by outside groups are truly independent of the candidate they're supporting. And so we'll be proposing some additional presumptions for when an expenditure would be considered coordinated with a committee.
And that's looking to other states that have looked at this issue. And so we're just trying to, I would say, bring it up to date as many ways as we can with what other people are doing that work.
Right. And what the IE committees are doing now, it's kind of an up to date. There's not a change in the law, but just a change, you know, it's been 7 or 10 years since those have been updated. And then in November, we're planning to bring some modifications to the enforcement complaint regulation. Enforcement wants to recommend some changes to the regulation just to reflect current procedures. So that's.
Commissioner Wasserman, did you have a
Good
question?
question. So with respect to the IEs, is that going to play into what I had previously been talking about with respect to issues of coordinating also with political party committees, such that we want to make sure that they participate as fully as possible in understanding what's going to come down the pipeline for them to deal with?
Well, I was thinking about that when you were saying, discussing that. I mean,
I saw the light bulb. But
It
I
kind
was
of-
like,
it can affect that a little because political parties can make, they're permitted under constitutional case law to make independent expenditures in certain situations. But I'm not sure it'll be exactly on target to what we were talking about this morning on the political party issue, but it's not earmarking, but it's just when an expenditure is coordinated or when it's independent under.
And that was the
1231.
aspect that I was referring to, because I think coordination is such an interesting area to try to deal with on all sides of, you know, what appears from the outside in terms of investigation, in terms of compliance, and et cetera. So
It's very fact-based.
thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions about the legal division report? Okay, the last one I would just highlight is the IT report, which I asked them to include, which is the very last page. Again, as I opened this meeting with, it's kind of just illustrates a lot of the work that's been going on here. We have several very large IT projects going on. As everyone knows, the Form 700 e-filing project. If anyone has any questions, Dave Porter's here. But we also have the website redesign, which is more than just a flashy new look. As you'll hear this afternoon, Jacob Patel's done a great job leading the team. But as I said, everyone in the agency has put a lot of time into that. And I think the real goal there is that it's going to, once again, make things easier for people to see and do. The idea is increasing searchability and just overall function. And we're just trying to make this really a goal here. And then we have another big project, which is the enforcement database, which is taking a lot of the enforcement's time as well, because that's not just getting a new IT project. It's really, as you know, looking at your business plan. How do you do things? How does the work flow? And they've had to spend a lot of time on designing that, and then at the same time improving the way they do things. So I think with that, the ultimate goal is increased efficiency for the enforcement division, but also more disclosure to the public, because there is going to be a public portal aspect of that for people to see complaints, status of complaints, and find cases easier. So I think it's going to be a great ultimate tool when that comes around. And then just we've had email migration. And I'll leave that at that. Any questions?
Madam Chair, I actually have two questions, one related to technical assistance division and one related to administrative division,
Okay.
if I may. and I wasn't sure if this falls in here, but I'm curious if there's been any thought to one of our, and I don't know if it falls under technical assistance, but it seems appropriate because we do our meetings sometimes in different parts of the state, and it's been a while since we've done one. I don't know if we've thought about doing one perhaps in conjunction with, we're already going to have a presence of staff doing an in-person training.
I'm sorry, I missed the first part. I'm sorry. What? The thought
So
of
we had a meeting in San Jose, I
Yeah.
think, our last one. I think we had one in San Diego before I joined the commission.
You mean holding commission meetings in other locations?
That's correct. That's correct. And we were at one point, but there was a lot of transition, talking about, since there was Commissioner Escovitz and myself in Los Angeles, about doing something in Los Angeles. And I know I talked to a couple of different cities with, considerable, with the capacity to technically support us, et cetera. And I was just curious if that process is something that we talk about through technical, or we talk about it in a different context of the agenda.
I think it would be talk about here at the commission, if all the commissioners agree, and then we can work with legal and probably admin on that. I would just say I think it's a great idea. I think the biggest concern for me would be cost. I know we could get a facility and the like, but a lot of people would have to go to a lot of places, and we are in a very tight budget.
Well, see, for me, and I understand that. I mean, and that actually goes to my second question. But in particular, and I don't know if it's too soon to go to San Bernardino County, but at some point it might not be a bad thing to hold one of our meetings out there, which is not necessarily more convenient for me. LA was great when there were two of us, and we could say, we've got a great population, a whole lot of filers, a whole lot of constituents. But something like that might be good, or somewhere else where it might be useful for us to create a greater opportunity for public input, particularly because our participation is greater now than it was before.
Disagree. I guess I would have two responses. The first one being with technology today, we're on, streaming live. I think that people can participate. I also just want to remind you that half the staff is going places at all times, putting on presentations, and maybe we should at the next committee hearing bring kind of a summary of where we've been and what we've done and who we've seen, because those are all over the state, and I think that's a really good way for the FPPC's presence to be known, and it's at the level of actually helping the local officials and the city clerks and the like do their job to the best they can. So it's a huge benefit, and I think that's the kind of thing I think you're also thinking of, and so maybe it's just a matter of sharing some of that information with the commissioners.
Right. I mean, that was actually why I put it on Ms. Cassidy here, because I was asking, sort of to figure out where we're going to be in the next year or so, if we know, and are there, economies of scale, things that we can do, more than one type of thing in the same budget to make it more attractive, because we may have different perceptions of how dollars and cents should be spent, but all of us are quite cognizant of the fact that we have X amount of dollars to do all of the above, and when we do one thing, we can't do something else. So yeah, if there's a hope that we can sort of think about those things with an eye to, are we going to have, if we're going to already have staff out here for some sort of major training opportunity, then maybe we could do something in conjunction. Or we may determine as a commission, after we get the information back, that no, that the cost projection for doing that is way out of line to what our usual costs for holding a commission meeting here are versus everything else. So that was what I had to say.
I was just trying to get a sense from the other commissioners. Is this something we're all feel strongly about, neutral, indifferent? What?
Yeah, I attended the meeting in San Jose. Obviously, that's not a huge resource. It's a long drive, but it's not a flight or anything like that. But I think that there was value in that, in actually holding a meeting in a different jurisdiction, and because there's some people who will attend in person and appreciate the fact that we're there. I think it's a good idea to look into the cost of something like that and consider, if we're going to go to Southern California, what would be the cost of that? And then we could probably have a deeper conversation about whether or not it makes sense. But I think conceptually, I'm in support of having a remote meeting at some point if it works budget-wise.
I sit on a number of boards and, there is some theoretical value to moving it around. I went to the meeting in San Jose also, and I did see a lot of the same faces that were in Sacramento had just driven. So that was kind of my perspective. So, I would be very open-minded to an evaluation of it. I know we have a very tight budget, and I'm, very sensitive to that too. So
we can look
It's
into
much
it.
like, sorry, madam.
No, I'm just gonna say we will definitely then look into it, see what's practical and how much it would cost, and bring that back.
Right. It's much like voter turnout efforts. You really want the participation, but after you spend the money, you made it to discover it didn't really have an effect. But you try. This leads into my question regarding the administrative division. Ms. Hahn, thank you so much for the update on the budget approval. And this they tie together because I'm hoping that perhaps we can do, and this is we've had so much transition that we haven't, that I recall, and sometime have sort of a formal public presentation about how the budget is actually allocated within the agency, which is, even though we spend a lot of our time on regulation and legislation and enforcement and training, we also are the oversight for the agency. So it would be really helpful, especially to make decisions like that, which actually are allocation decisions. If maybe at some point in the next couple of meetings, we could have something that's sort of a breakdown. But I really appreciate seeing this because, that way I didn't have to wade through the lines and the budget. So thank you. But that's, and if the chair wants to inquire if the rest of the commissioners are in agreement with this sort of proposal.
So you want a more detailed budget? Because I mean, again, as you can see, the vast majority, as is with most agencies, it's salary and wages and benefits, and then there is the operations and overhead, which again, rent and the like. So but you want that broken down? I'm just curious what you want, what more you want.
Okay. Well, I'm not sure what we have that's more easily presentable. Yes, we can break things down into their subcomponents of rent. You can get down into the budget allocation for particular positions, et cetera, as we understand how things all play out. But I'm just really more used to seeing more, to be able to understand, okay, if we determine this is how much it costs to do what project we're doing, if there was a budget allocation for that project, where are we? How are we performing? Do you know what I mean? I don't have an idea of, when we talk about, we're doing this IT project, do we determine how much in terms of staff resources that is vis-a-vis something else?
Well, that was a whole process in itself with the feasibility study report and the budget
Right, I'm just using that as an example.
So I mean, that's allocated exactly as presented to the Department of Finance, with every position and cost going through the 3-year future.
It's budget year plus 2. Yes.
But
because I think we are actually capable of generating information basically down to a very specific detail level. And I don't think that's particularly difficult, and I don't think it's a bad thing to actually have.
So that's all I'm asking is what you want. You want every line item.
Well, I think I'll just say yes, because that would be simpler, because you're giving me a yes or no rather than trying to parse out something further. Yeah, sure.
Just trying to understand the focus, but okay. Larissa, we'll talk about what can be presented, or what's the best way to do it so it's most understandable, and bring it back.
Yeah, I'll have a try next month, coming back to the commission meeting with a proposal, what we could break down. Then that way, Chairman, you could tell me whether or not that's doable.
And I'm happy to talk to you, because I think I don't want to waste your time, have you come back and say, oh, and then Commissioner Wasserman said it wasn't what he wanted. Oh, he put him on the phone,
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other comments? All right. Then this meeting will be, I'll move to adjourn.
I'll second.
Thank you.
Commissioner Kasher?
Yes.
Commissioner Wasserman?
Yes.
Commissioner Nguyen?
Yes.
Chair Remke?
Yes. Thank
Dismissed.
you.
Yeah.